which brings us to my favorite part of the show, the Auspicious Op-Ed. So I got some words for everyone. They meant a lot to me, and I hope they mean something to you. Here goes. Infiltration appears to be a major dynamic that we all must become more adept at clearly deciphering, identifying, and dismantling for a more efficient restoration of peace and integrity to our society. The long game was taken to a whole new level since the contemporary era began unfolding before the crash on Black Tuesday back in 1929. I know a little more than most, having a most unique upbringing, very post-Depression style back in the 80s and 90s, having been raised by my grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandmother in a multi-generational home in a very small rural town on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. The things you see today are so much more senseless, thoughtless, and artificial than they were before the world was flung into its first major global financial nightmare, pushing systems and stability to the brink of total destruction. If only they had been wise enough to cut their losses and walk away from the lazy dreams of entitled decadence because they thought they could enslave money to make them more money in this thing called a stock market. The ancestors of many of the major players on the stage today are rooted in the financial debauchery that rose to fashion after the fraud and devastation of the early industrial antebellum era. Let us not forget how many rubber checks were cashed like they were legit, written by the CSA, not the USA. And CSA is the Confederate States of America. But they were cashed overseas as though it was the legitimate federal government everyone was used to cashing checks from, and not those despot Confederates. Only now does my grandfather's remark, damn communists, we can't ever let them think they can take this country ever again, whenever we would pass rebel flags driving down the road in the country. When I was young, I couldn't imagine the Democratic Party returning to its disgusting Jacksonian roots the way we have seen those commies show their true colors as they ran every sensible liberal and moderate clear out of town over the past decade. Globalists have no use for good people in any system. Just like the communists exiled the intelligentsia back in the Soviet Union, if they didn't sentence them to worse than being exiled. When they were just no longer convenient for use, they were done with them. They washed their hands of them. And that was who did most of their, mental work, their brain work, but they just didn't believe in communism and they never submitted to it. So they were exiled or worse happened to them. So, let's remember the same thing is probably going to follow. Anti-globalists and anti-totalitarians who wish to defend and uphold our Constitution will be regarded as enemies of the state by every institution puppeteered by the deep state, NGOs, and stakeholder capitalists. Patriotism has been misconstrued as right-wing nationalism when the truth is that this is just what communists do because they are illiterate in the name of solidarity and further the illiteracy of future generations to cement the destruction of the respect for individuals and their rights through towing the line and, following the script. The Red Scare was not in vain, but it did not in any way prevent the communist infiltration of our higher education systems in the 60s and 70s, followed by the KGB's admitted infiltration of our K-12 education system in 1984. I encourage everyone to do their research so that they can finally come to understand that neoliberalism, neoconservatism, imperialism, communism, socialism, fascism, despotism, totalitarianism, and authoritarianism are all different flavors of the same narcissistic disease, the insatiable quest for more and more supply at any cost. It is up to us to nip this in the bud, slow and steady, nudge method infiltration, without any hesitation. In the beginning, I was far more open to debate and reasoning when I thought they would approach new or different ideas with maturity and openness. Then I found out just how unreasonable the mass formation was common amongst the normies, has become especially common within the self-declared leftists. The plot was set in motion long ago, enough that on some cases, more than 2 generations have been indoctrinated to side with idealism that is not being presented honestly or completely. American school children go to school to learn that everything in America is immoral and unethical in this twisted, quasi-secular, Luciferian, neo-Maoist brainwashing model imposed by force after the neo-Marxists planted the seeds during the Cold War era. Starting to make sense yet? I'm just getting started here at the supplemental broadcast, and we're going to uncover more as we go on this journey together.